717 questions from this week. There are a ton of them, and I'm going to answer them as fast as I can. The first one is about the regret of God and the Noahic flood, the event of Noah, where it says that God was sorry he'd even made man. And the question is, well, was he surprised they turned out that way? The answer, if God is omniscient and omnipotent, the answer is no. And even his question of Cain and Abel, remember, he tells Cain, hey, you're about to do something here you shouldn't do, so be careful. Sin is crouching at your door. The bigger issue here is to show that sin and the proliferation of sin broke the heart of God, so much so that he regretted the way things turned out, his heartbreak, and almost answering this question, well, why doesn't he start over? Which is exactly what he's going to do. And the reason, it gives the reason for starting over. This is not a surprise on the heart of God, but a regret for the way sin had blown up in the heart of humanity. So it's really almost an explanation as to why the Noahic flood. Why does God bring the flood? Because his heart's broken over human sin. Is he surprised by this? The answer is, I think, no, because God's omniscient. But can someone, even knowing something is going to take place, have heartbreak over it? The answer is every day of human existence has examples just like this, where a parent will let a college student who's kind of running loose and making bad choices say, okay, I'm going to turn him loose even though I know this is going to turn out badly and I'm going to regret it, but I don't know what else to do with them. The parent knows the outcome, the parent regrets the outcome, but this isn't because the parent doesn't know what the kid is going to do. So this is, I think, how it is with God, over and over trying to woo people back or wooing people back to him, over and over them rejecting and becoming more and more evil, and then finally him saying, my heart is so broken, I'm going to start all over. So I think that's what the idea there is. The next thing is there a commentary on how Cain killed Abel? The answer is no. I have no idea how he kills him. It says he rises up against his brother. I assume it means he beat him to death or strangled him or something, but I don't know. Probably not a gun, hadn't been invented yet. So, but that's what I'm gonna say there. The next question is, could Cain have fought off the sin or not? Well, I think the answer to that is God implies he could. He says, be careful. Sin is crouching at your door. Not only does God seem to imply Cain has the ability to, God even helps him try to fight off this temptation, and Cain fails to do so. So I think the answer is yes, just like Adam and Eve could have said no to the serpent and failed to do so. On the question of the Tower of Babel, does God literally relocate all these individuals? I think the answer is no. I think he drives them out. That he doesn't literally pick them up and drop them in places around the globe, but drives them out, like separates them, causes confusion, causes them to get more and more clannish or cliquish or culturally isolated from other people, and to move further and further away from each other. Ironically, this is how C.S. Lewis describes hell in his famous book, The Great Divorce, is that in heaven, people love being together, and in hell, they hate being around each other and move further and further away from each other, till you have the absolute most spread out civilization ever, where people never talk to each other, they hate being around each other, they hate their own existence. And so C.S. Lewis describes it that way. I think Tower of Babel is like a miniature picture of hell. People hate being around each other, they get more and more isolated, they get their own language, their own culture, and say, we don't want to be around the rest of you. So I think that's it. Not that God literally took them and dropped them all over the planet. The next question is, where does Cain get his wife? This is an age-old question. Where does he get his wife? He marries a sister. Adam and Eve live hundreds and hundreds of years, and actuarially speaking, as an actuary, I've done some studies on how many generations of people. He either marries a daughter of Adam and Eve. It could be a granddaughter of Adam and Eve, not just a sister, maybe a niece or something like that. Because population could spread actually quite quickly with a husband and wife having several children, and within 100 years you have 5 generations of kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. And I know it's creepy for us to think of someone marrying their niece who might be 30 years younger than them, but when you live 900 years, that's really not that big a difference. So anyway, so I think that's what's going on. He married a niece, he married a sister, he marries a cousin. Who knows exactly what's going on here, but it's something like that. Yeah, and so on the prohibition of marrying a sister, this is actually not an early prohibition. It becomes later. Early on, genetic disorders do come in over time, but like all other diseases, and we've seen from genetic studies of burial sites that diseases have grown over time through the introduction of genetic disorders and through the introduction of various diseases and sins and some environmental things we've done to ourselves. So early on, in a very pristine environment, the genetic issue of marrying your sister would not have had the same implications as it does today. We do know, though, by the time of the flood or thereafter, that within Egypt, for instance, marrying your brother or sister did start to create some genetic problems. So a couple of thousand years after this Cain event, maybe 3,000 years later, whatever, we know we start to see some genetic problems within the Egyptian hierarchy and rulers. So anyway, so there you have that. Yes, he married a sister or a cousin or a niece or something like that. And that does become a prohibition, but it becomes a prohibition thousands of years later. All right, here's another question. This is someone saying, you know, how is it that burning food in a fire isn't wasteful, but it's considered an offering? The answer is that when you burn grain in a fire, it has an aroma to it, and it's more like saying, look, God owns everything, and so this part belongs to him, and so by burning grain or meat in a fire, it was an ancient way of saying everything that we have belongs to God, and in fact, I want my whole life, including the things he's given, to be an aroma to him. And so what you would do is burn it in a fire in a way that actually was not only showing that God owned it all, but also showing that you wanted everything in your life to be a positive aroma going up to heaven. And so this is this idea that I think is involved in the grain offering and the meat offering. It's not wasteful. It's not any more wasteful than the time we spend singing praise to God. It's a way of basically laying your life before God and saying, I want the words of my mouth to be pleasing in God's sight. And we do things like raise hands in worship or clap, or we play instruments, things that give expression to the worship in our heart. And so these early offerings of grain and food were a way to give people physical manifestations of the worship that's in their heart. And I think that's what's going on with the grain and food offering. Wow, there was a ton of questions there. I answered them as fast as I could. If I didn't complete an answer in there, or you don't like one of those, just retext and I'll give it a try next week. See you Sunday night.